Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host on Mondays and Thursdays, Casey Foreman. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. A whole lot to talk about. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Like I've been saying, a packed show for you guys, despite not having basketball, despite the season being over, like we've been discussing, LA are our champions, our 2020 champions. But like I've been discussing, the season is now over. So now, here in the basketball media, we tend now to either look forward or look backward in time. Look at next season. Look at last year's season. Today's episode, I should tell you guys, is going to be a whole lot of looking forward, looking at what is going to come next in basketball. I want to start out by talking about Stan Van Gundy. He is officially the head coach of the New Orleans Pelicans after signing a 4-year deal. He's there for, a decent amount of time. I want to break down that move for Stan Van Gundy for the Pelicans, talk about the Pelicans going forward. I then want to take a look at this year's NBA free agency. We don't quite know when that's going to take place, but I want to take a look at some of the players that are available this year. I then want to look at this year's NBA draft, the first NBA draft, I should say, in NBA history. Look at some of the players that we might see going top 5. Simply take a look at this year's NBA draft as well as free agency. And then at the end of the podcast today, I want to discuss Damian Lillard's comments. Some of listing, he was asked on social media, I should say, to list some of his favorite all-time attributes from players in NBA history. I want to break down his comments, maybe talk about some of my personal thoughts on that matter as well. So a packed show, like I said, for you guys today. A whole lot of looking forward, looking at what is to come next for the world of basketball and for the NBA. Like I said, let's start out with Stan Van Gundy. He is the new head coach in New Orleans. Stan, back in the head coaching role after a 3-year hiatus, if you will, has gotten into broadcasting like his brother Jeff, and has done a very good job. I've had a very good time listening to him calling many games. I think he did a very good job while he was broadcasting. So I was happy to see him as a broadcaster. But I know what he really wanted, what his role he was really looking for was another head coaching position. So I'm glad to see him getting another job again after 3 years of not having one. The last time we saw him in the head coaching role was back in Detroit. He was there for about 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. So about a 4-year, length of coaching for him in Detroit that didn't necessarily end well. I think they ended up getting swept by Cleveland in the postseason. I believe they ended up they traded for Blake Griffin, yes, from the Clippers. Didn't end up, going that well. They missed the playoffs. They let go of Stan Van Gundy. So that is kind of how his tenure ended, his length of time ended with Detroit. Like I said, 3 years break now back into the head coaching role with the Pelicans. Glad to see it. And after the Pelicans, let's talk about the Pelicans a little bit. After they went 30-42 this prior season. Yep. I know. I understand. You just traded your franchise guy and Anthony Davis. Everyone expected a complete reboot, a complete rebuild. It kind of is, but you got a definite head start on that reboot by getting Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram being a first-time All-Star, most improved player. So I'd say the timeline has definitely been moved up in New Orleans, from where we thought they were last year, before this point, before the Anthony Davis trade, or right after the Anthony Davis trade, I should say, before the whole Zion thing. Before the Anthony Davis trade, before the whole Zion thing, I should say, before they got Zion, before they got Zion, Brandon, Lonzo, not Zion. I confused Lonzo and Zion, a couple of Z's there. Before they got Zion, Lonzo, Brandon Ingram, just as the trade rumors were going around, we were worried about this New Orleans team for another reboot, another restart, saying they were going to be, in the lottery for years and years and years again. But again, like I said, that timeline has definitely been moved up. However, a disappointing season last year, going 30-42, like I said, failing to make the playoffs for consecutive years, and also failing to make the playoffs despite having an easy seeding game schedule. If you guys remember, in Orlando, the 8 seeding games that they did play, they had a seeding game schedule that was released prior to them playing, and they easily had the easiest seeding game schedule of any team, of any of the 22 teams that went to the bubble. They played the Kings a couple of times. They played the Spurs once. They played who else? I should say the two hardest games. They had 2 hard games. They played the Clippers and the Jazz. Besides that, a whole lot. They played the Grizzlies. Like I said, the Kings a couple of times. The Spurs, who weren't great, obviously. So they had a couple of gimme games, a couple of attaboys, if you will. Were definitely expected to, in my opinion, and a whole lot of other people. If you look back at that date when the schedule was released, a lot of people were favoriting them, giving them the pass, the nod at getting that 8th spot, despite having, being 3 games back to the Memphis Grizzlies, who obviously had the 3.5 game lead to New Orleans, to the Trailblazers, even more to San Antonio and Phoenix. They all ended up going, obviously, but yes, Grizzlies had a 3-game lead. Despite that, New Orleans was still favored to get that spot because of the easy game schedule. However, they ultimately, crack under the pressure, under the big lights. Zion doesn't seem to be all in the best of shape. And yeah, the defense is shaky. I don't see the best of offense. Again, Zion doesn't seem to be the focal point of the offensive end, not the greatest ball movement, a lot of ISO ball. Again, inconsistent defense. Zion seems to be not in the best of shape. Lonzo is not picking up where he left off at the, end of the regular season hiatus. So, yeah, all that equals to the Pelicans missing the playoffs and the Pelicans firing their head coach and Alvin Gentry after 5 seasons. If you guys don't remember, Alvin Gentry was there for about 5 years and couldn't get the done. I think had consecutive. No, I think he made it to the second round once with Anthony Davis. Yeah, they beat the Trailblazers in the first round. Then I think they got beat by the Warriors in the second round. Maybe either way. They made it out of the first round once, despite that only one playoff win in his 5 years there. A whole lot of playoff, or not making the playoffs, I should say. And like I said, the NBA definitely wanted Zion and the Pelicans in the postseason to face off against LA in the first round. Anthony Davis's old team, all those young players in New Orleans, all their old team, the team they just got shipped away from. So yes, that was the storyline, the matchup people were wanting in the first round. The NBA was definitely wanting in the first round. Your young number 1 overall pick making the playoffs in his first year. Of course, that is what the NBA wanted. That is why we saw the Pelicans getting a relatively easy seeding game schedule. At least I think that was one of the bigger factors going into it. You can look at maybe they had a relatively easy schedule going into the end of the regular season. Maybe that had a factor into it as well. Either way, they have an easier seeding game schedule. They don't play well up to their expectations. They lose, don't make playoffs, and fire the head coach in Alvin Gentry. So overall, with the hiring, I want to break it down a little bit more in a second, but overall, with the hiring of Stan Van Gundy, I want to say right from the get-go, I do like it. I like the hire. He's coached a total of 907 games, almost 1,000 games in the NBA, and has won over 500 of those. So he's a veteran, has been there, has been to an NBA final. So right now, I want to say I like the hire. Like I just said, Stan is a vet in this league, has been coaching since 2003. Started off with the Miami Heat, got let go, and then the year after that, they ended up winning the title with Pat Riley, Dwayne Wade, and Shaquille O'Neal. I believe, I'm not quite sure. I think Stan might have been there when they first orchestrated the trade for Shaquille. I'm not quite sure. Either way, starts off in Miami in 2003. Then moves to Orlando. Then obviously his last coaching job was in Detroit. Went to the NBA Finals with Dwight Howard and the Orlando Magic back in 2009. We know how that ended. Losing to Kobe and the Lakers, the late and great Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. But we know how that ended up. Simply the inferior team in that matchup against Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. Kobe wanted it more. Kobe went out there and dominated in those finals, getting his fourth title. I think that was Kobe's his fourth title. Yeah, that was his fourth title, definitely. So Kobe gets his fourth. Despite that, Stan and the Orlando Magic still beat LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, I should tell you guys, to make the NBA Finals back in 2009. So yes, Stan and the Magic and Dwight beat LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers to get there. Okay, so that's on his resume. Okay. So he's been there, done that, made an NBA Finals. Stan Van Gundy also, if you guys are not sure of this, I'm sure you are, known for his defensive mindset, his defensive matchups, game plan. An interesting stat for you guys, all of Stan Van Gundy's teams, Miami, Orlando, or Detroit, all at one point were top 10 defenses in the NBA at one point. Orlando was a top 5 defense. Miami was a top 10 defense. I think they never went above a top 10 defense or below. And then Detroit started out, I think the stat was they started out as one of the worst defensive teams in the league when Stan first got there in 2014. I believe they were ranked 25th. By the time he ended up leaving, they were ranked in the top 10. So that is the Stan Van Gundy effect. Yes, defense is his way of life, his way of teaching. And again, I'm glad to see that being brought to New Orleans, brought to the Pelicans. Again, everywhere he's gone, a dominant defense, top 10, if not top 5, Miami, Orlando, and Detroit. And if you've watched this team in the bubble, the New Orleans Pelicans, if you guys watched them, had a chance to watch them in Orlando, they were terribly defensively, despite having, very good defensive pieces like Lonzo Ball, who was arguably the leader of the Lakers defense the year prior. Drew Holiday, who is the leader of the New Orleans defense, has been an all-NBA defensive player. Known for his two-way play. Also, Zion Williamson, we know what explosive plays he can do on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. The chase down blocks, he can seemingly guard almost, I don't know about 1 through 5, but multiple positions definitely Zion can guard. So you got multiple defensive pieces in Lonzo, Drew Holiday, and Zion. They either need, in the bubble at least, and now, they either needed to be woken up or they needed a better defensive game plan. And with Alvin Gentry being an offensive-minded coach, I think that might have been the biggest issue. The defensive game plan might not have been there all of the time in comparison to the offense that they were always worrying about, seemingly. Again, they needed to either be woken up or a better game plan, or needed to have a better game plan. And I have faith that Stan Van Gundy can do both of those things. He can definitely yell at them, chirp at them, wake them up, a veteran coach in this league, or, and give them, some of his top 10 defensive tricks that he's had in Miami, Orlando, and Detroit. So I think he can come in and fix them defensively, okay? My only question for them, or for Stan and this hire, is offensively. Historically speaking, offensively, Stan has not been, a liability by any means, but it's no doubt that his teams have been better on the defensive side than on the offensive side. And with today's game, a great offense will beat a great defense. We know that. So ultimately, my biggest question here and for this hire is, yes, we know what he can do on the defensive side. What can he do on the offensive side? Again, he hasn't been a liability by any means, but, can he adapt to the way the game is being played now? Perhaps he can bring some of the old school, old style play back into the league today, with the, tough team that he does have, hopefully defensively. Again, they have defensive pieces as well as offensive pieces with Zion, Holiday, Lonzo, B.I. So Lonzo, Holiday, and Zion are two-way players, and they do have an offensive player like B.I., Brandon Ingram, who solely focuses, it seems like, on the offensive end. So they have players to play on both sides of the basketball. Again, my biggest concern is, can he adapt to the way the game is being played now? We know a great offense will beat a great defense. I definitely know, though, this team is getting a great leader, a guy with a high basketball IQ. Can he develop and get the best out of this team? We've been hearing him broadcasting, on TV for several years now. And, he's kept up with the game, obviously, with broadcasting, with sportscasting and such. So I think with him being, staying relevant with the game, staying up with the broadcasting, me listening to some of his broadcasts, enjoying his broadcasts as well, the content I've been hearing from him, his opinion, his overall seem for the game, IQ for the game seems pretty high. And, I have confidence that he is the right hire for the Pelicans. He's gotta be able, though. Another thing, I have faith he will be able to do this 100%, but he's gotta be able to have the tough conversations with players, and perhaps that was the reason they decided to go with a tough veteran coach like Stan Van Gundy, because he will be capable of having these tough conversations with these players. And, for example, if you guys are wondering what I'm talking about, for Zion, you got to go in there and tell Zion, hey man, you're great, you're fantastic, number one pick, true potential, your ceiling is very high. However, you gotta lose weight. You gotta get in better shape. You gotta be able to play 30 or so minutes every night. That is not where he is today by any means. That is where he needs to be if he wants to be an All-NBA, an all-star player, which the ceiling of him is. So if he wants to meet that ceiling, reach that ceiling, he needs to be able to play 30-plus minutes per night. He's not there yet. He needs to lose weight, get in better shape, and ultimately that will help him, keep him away from injuries, hopefully as well. So Stan Van Gundy, you gotta tell Zion right away, you're a great player. Your ceiling is high, but you gotta lose weight. You gotta play 30-plus minutes per night to be an all-star in this league. For Brandon Ingram, you got to go tell him, hey, again, you're great offensively, most improved player, an all-star for the first time. We're going to try to get that second year consecutive for you, definitely, but you might not always be able to shoot the ball 18 times and have 27 points, or shoot the ball 20 times and have 25, 27 points. You might not be able to do that every single night. You're going to have to share the ball, move the ball, share the sugar a little bit. You're not going to always be our number one scorer on every night. We got to get Zion going with the way he plays, the way that you can get defenses to gravitate towards him. It's going to help you in the long run. We got to get Zion, Lonzo, Drew Holiday. We got to get them going as well as you for this team to hit its true ceiling. So you're not always going to be able to shoot the ball 18, 20 times, have 25, 30 points per game. We're still going to get you back at that all-star level, hopefully. Hopefully Zion doesn't take that spot from you next year. But still, you might have to dial back just a little bit as far as shot attempts and, holding on to the ball as well. I know you're an ISO player, tend to take, make your money that way. You're trying to get an extension. I completely understand that. But the way this team is going to win is by sharing the ball, everyone getting involved, not so much ISO ball, less shot attempts. Perhaps for Brandon Ingram, you still got to get him involved. He needs to still be at over 20 points per game for New Orleans to stay competitive and compete. And for Lonzo Ball, you got to tell him, hey, man, I don't know what it really is. Maybe you don't need to have this conversation with him. Maybe that'll just shake him up a little more. But Lonzo needs to know that he needs to get consistent. Okay, needs to be consistent. And I know that's much easier said than done. But we've seen some great showings from Lonzo. We've also seen some very bad percentages from Lonzo. So a lot of shaky performances, a lot of very good performances. I loved what I saw from him, at the end of the regular season before the hiatus. I loved what I was seeing from Lonzo, averaging over 20 points per game, or almost 20 points per game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, was playing very good basketball, some of the best of his career. Did not see that in the Orlando bubble. You got to tell him, make sure he knows, you got to be consistent for this team to win. Not always score 20 points, but 15, man, we need you at 15, and we need you at 7 points and 7 rebounds like you've been doing, if not more. So you got to stay consistent. No more some nights you're scoring 0 points or 2 points. Some nights you're scoring 18. Some nights you're hitting 3 threes, 4 threes. Some nights you're going 1 for 8. So no more of that. We need to see more consistency from Lonzo Ball in his third? This is third or 1, 2, 3. This will be his 4th NBA season. So yes, we definitely need to see more consistency from him in his 4th season. So those are the conversations Stan needs to make. I'm very, I have high faith in him that he is capable in having the conversations with Zion, Lonzo, and Brandon Ingram. And again, I think that's what he will exactly do. We will see how high this team's ceiling is, again, with players like Zion, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Drew Holiday. The ceiling is definitely high here. You still got some cap room to mess around with if you want to bring in another, perhaps an all-star who wants to run with this group. Who knows? Either way, you got options here. You definitely have assets here in New Orleans. A whole lot of young players. You almost made the playoffs this year. You got a veteran head coach here who knows the game of basketball, who can help your defensive issues. Man, the ceiling on this team should be pretty high. I don't want to say it's playoffs. It's kind of playoffs or bust, though, I think, for them. If they're healthy all year, this team, Brandon Ingram being in his 5th year, perhaps, or Lonzo getting into his 4th, Zion in his 2nd now. Stan Van Gundy, a veteran head coach. It's perhaps time this team starts, progressing, getting better, getting closer, if not making the postseason next year. The ceiling is high. However, the Western Conference, as we know, is so good, so tough, and so competitive. So if they don't make the NBA postseason, it better be because it's so competitive, and it's because Portland, the Grizzlies, Phoenix, the Warriors are going to be back next year, so it better be because of all of the stacked teams, not because of you coming up short. Again, we'll see how high this team's ceiling is and how far this team can go with its new leader. But man, that Western Conference is tough and competitive, so we will see if Stan is the man and can get it done in New Orleans. I want to go ahead and take a quick break. When I come back, I want to take a look at this year's NBA free agency, what players are available in this year's offseason. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everybody. Like I said before the break, I want to talk about and take a look into this year's NBA 2020 NBA free agency. This year's NBA free agency was originally scheduled for October 18th. We were originally supposed to have our free agency basically right now, obviously, but that got pushed back, obviously, and now TBD. We are waiting for the NBA free agency to be announced to take place. So TBD on that to be announced. But let's go ahead and break it down either way, because since it has been rescheduled and or pushed back, that gives us more time to discuss it, to break it down, and to talk about all the players that might find new homes. So again, it gives me more time to discuss it, to break it down. So I'm kind of okay with their decision to push it back. Then again, if it would have already taken place and we had new players in new homes, yeah, that gives me a whole lot of more content to talk about as well, right? So it's kind of a win-win for me here and basketball media, right? So we'll take anything we can get here with the NBA season, like I said, coming to a close. We will definitely take whatever we can get. But again, this year's NBA free agency, not a whole lot of big names or superstars, as you will. But I think there's a whole lot of very good role players, a whole lot of very good players that can contend and contribute, I should say, to championship contending level teams. And it definitely makes sense, for them to push back this year's NBA free agency. Again, the season just got done a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, it seems like. Not even 2 weeks ago, I don't think. I'm not really quite sure with school and everything that's, with class and assignments and, sports, the election, and the pandemic, everything that's going on. It's kind of hard to keep track of time and everything. So my sense of time might be a little bit off, but a whole lot going on right now. Again, with the season just getting done, we just recently got our title, our champions. So it makes sense for them to push it back. The pandemic, the whole election that's going on right now. So yes, there is a lot going on right now. But let's try not to think about. Let's try to take a break from the world. Try to take a break from what's going on and relax and just simply think and listen and talk about basketball. This year's NBA free agency. Let's start out with some of the big names, because I did say there aren't too many, but there are a couple of bigger names in this year's free agency. The biggest name obviously has to be Anthony Davis, clearly the biggest name, the best player in this year's free agency, a first-time champion, should have been this year's defensive player of the year, in my opinion. I was wrong on that one. Apparently Giannis ends up winning the award. I think, proof is in the pudding there. He ends up winning the title. LA looks dominant defensively in the postseason. Either way, Anthony Davis, like I said, clearly the best player in this year's postseason. However, like I said, after winning a title in Los Angeles, I find it being very unlikely he is going anywhere. And it would have been very interesting if the Lakers had lost the finals or not even made the finals, if they had a bad ending to the season. Yes, Anthony Davis in this year's free agency is definitely, would have definitely have been a much hotter topic, as you will, a lot more people talking about it. But with him, playing so well, Los Angeles playing so well, them winning the championship, I don't think he's going anywhere, and I think that's pretty easy pretty easy to say, pretty safe to say. A safe bet would to be he's going to be in Los Angeles for the foreseeable future. Brandon Ingram, another bigger name out there, another all-star name out there, if you will, but similar to Anthony Davis, quite honestly, I don't see Brandon Ingram going anywhere. A first-time All-Star, for most improved player, averaged the most points of his career, had the ball for the most time of his career, was the focal point of the offense for the most part of the season. We'll see what Stan Van Gundy thinks, how high he is of Brandon Ingram, what he thinks he is worth. But I am predicting, honestly, pretty easily, like similar to AD staying in Los Angeles. I think it's a pretty safe bet that we're going to see Brandon Ingram staying in New Orleans for the next foreseeable, for the next couple of years at least. I think for his next contract at least, I think he'll play it out with New Orleans. They'll play this roster out, see how high this ceiling is. I see an extension coming for Brandon Ingram very soon. And the Pelicans, Gordon Hayward, another, big name out there. But again, similar to Brandon Ingram, similar to Anthony Davis, I see him staying where he is, and that is most likely because of the price tag, because of the contract, the amount of money he will be making if he does opt in to this contract with Boston, and that is $34 million. So if he opts in with Boston, he gets a $34 million contract for the year. I think that's a no-brainer. You stay in Boston on the loaded roster. You try it one more year. After that, maybe you build up your stock and maybe go go seek out another contract, perhaps. Or you stick it out with Boston. Either way, though, Gordon Hayward, coming off the injuries as well. I don't think he's maybe getting back to 100%. I don't know if he'll ever be the same player, quite frankly, ever again than he was before that huge injury that happened to him. But still, Gordon Hayward, similar to BI, similar to AD, no cool initials for GH, if you will. But I see him staying in Boston because of that $34 million option he has. If he does opt in, you build up your stock, give it one more year, get yourself healthy for another year, and test next year's market in 2021. One guy, however, I could see leaving, the biggest name that I could see leaving where he is right now has got to be a guy like Demar Derozan. Rumors are circulating. They kind of have been circulating for a while now. He is not exactly loving his time in San Antonio, not necessarily hating. He's not saying, I got to, get me out of here by any means. But I don't think that's the ideal situation, a conservative system for him. I think a mid-range player, that's honestly, it kind of makes sense for him to stay in San Antonio, quite frankly. I don't know where else might be a better place for him. You got a decent roster, a good coach, a decent orchestra structure or a structure there for you. Overall, they just missed the playoffs for the first time in a couple of decades. So yeah, not the best team to leave, but ultimately you could get out before it's too late. Maybe now we're seeing this Spurs for the first time in a long time. Maybe we'll see them taking a turn downhill. A lot of their players like LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan as well, getting older. Not too many of young players on this roster. So perhaps it is time for DeMar DeRozan to leave San Antonio, take his talents elsewhere while he still can, while he's still relatively young, right? So maybe it's time for him to leave San Antonio, since there are rumors circulating that he is not quite happy where he is in the system, in the city where he is living currently. So rumors are circulating that currently usually means, there's a little bit of truth to it, right? Not always, not in every rumor, right? Not always by any means, but still, with his situation, where he is, the type of player he is, being a guy from Los Angeles, he wanted to go LA, decided to settle in Toronto, then gets shipped out, stabbed in the back a little bit, but by the Toronto Raptor organization. I think he wants to go to a place that he wants to be. Finally, I hope at least he takes matters into his own hands, goes somewhere that he wants to be. If he wants to be in San Antonio, sure, stay where you are. But again, it might be a smarter move for DeMar to move to change teams, organizations while he still can. But then the question arises: where does he fit? Is New York still looking for he's not a superstar. Is New York still looking for an all-star, a big named talent? We know they kind of struck out with KD, Kyrie, Zion, Anthony Davis. Go down the list. New York has struck out on them. So we know they've been wanting to get these high caliber, big named players to try to get New York back on the map, if you will. So is New York still looking for an all-star? Are they willing to give up some players, clear up some cap room to sign DeMar to a max contract, perhaps? So is New York still looking? Could he fit there? Could he go to Miami, who still has max big contract cap space open? Could he go to Miami and add to the depth there? Not sure. I think DeMar does have options. He could end up staying in San Antonio, pick up his option there, and I think it is a player option. He could opt in, make 20-something million this year, or he could opt out, take a chance on himself, and take a chance in free agency. We'll see. I'm not quite sure how big the market is for DeMar DeRozan at this time, quite frankly. Another name out there right now, Andre Drummond. But right now, he came out and said publicly, actually. So as of right now, for the next season, foreseeable future, as I know right now, he is staying in Cleveland for some reason. I'm not quite sure. I think the biggest reason, obviously, you could look at is his paycheck he's going to be receiving over the next year. I don't like to be money grabbing or money watching, pocket watching. I think that's the term, or anything like that. But it's probably because of the $28 million he can make if he opts in Cleveland. I think that's the biggest reason he's going to stay there for one more year. Besides that, it's a losing roster. Nothing to talk about, really. You're arguably the best player. Are you the best player on that team? I'm not quite sure. Again, not quite sure Andre Drummond's reason to stay. My best guess is he's chasing that money, that bag, obviously, getting $28 million next year if he stays in Cleveland. He came out and said publicly that's what he's doing. So Andre Drummond, book it. He's going to be in Cleveland at least at the beginning of the season. I think it's likely we see a move and they get an asset for him. Or perhaps maybe he's a part of the young, because he's only 20 odd years old. So maybe he's a part of their young future going forward. They only gave up a second round pick and maybe Brandon Knight for him. So you didn't give up too much to get him. Now you have an all-star caliber player in Andre Drummond. So in Cleveland's point of view, yeah, keep him around for as long as you can. The Magic, on the other hand, and to change topics, the Magic will most likely try and keep Evan Fournier on the roster since he is one of their more consistent scorers. Fournier, though a free agent this year, I think he will stay in Orlando. I think Orlando at least will make a conscious effort to make him to make him stay, to help him stay. If Evan wants to go out and maybe chase some hardware like Victor Oladipo has been saying, I need some hardware. Maybe Evan's feeling the same way, wants to go sign with a contending team, maybe for a little bit less money, or continue to make your money on a poor team. You be one of the better players on a poor team, maybe make some money in Orlando. Depends what path Evan kind of feels like making in his career at this point. Now I want to discuss some quality players that I actually think we will see move in quality places. Some players I've been talking about: Evan Fournier, Andre Drummond, AD, DeMar, BI, most likely players who might not be going anywhere. I hope DeMar ends up getting out of San Antonio at one point, but for the most part, those players not necessarily going to be going anywhere. Let's discuss some quality players who will most likely be in different positions, different places next year. First guy I think of, Danilo Gallinari. This year in OKC, 18 points, 5.5 rebounds, did a very good job for them, came in and gave them instant offense. So Danilo Gallinari has made it known he's looking for his next home. Where should he go? Can come in and distribute no matter where he is. Did very good, when he was with the Clippers. It very obviously shined in OKC. Was a big part of them making the postseason this year. So Gallinari, a free agent this year. I think there are tons of places. I think Milwaukee is a place that's being talked about right now that would love to have a guy like Gallinari. Davis Bertans, 15, 4, and 6 for him in DC on 42% from the three-point line as well for Davis Bertans. Not a guy you always hear about, but can shoot the three ball, spread the floor, and is a power forward as well. So a floor-spreading big man who can shoot the three. I definitely think he will be on some people's short list of players to go after this year. Montrez Harrell as well, this year's Sixth Man of the Year winner. After, and this is easy to say, after an embarrassing end in the postseason, blowing the 3-1 lead, him not necessarily playing in how well he was playing in the regular season, I am predicting perhaps him staying with the Clippers because his stock isn't too high, or perhaps we see a sign and trade. The Clippers try to get some sort of assets or pieces for him, try to build up the roster. We will see. Not quite sure how high the stock is or the value is right now in the sixth man of the year in Montrez Harrell after this year's performance in the postseason. A guy I'm super excited about in this year's free agency. Not quite sure where he should go. I think there are a couple of places that are good for him. Potentially, he could stay in Toronto. He could go maybe sign a big contract elsewhere and be a big name, a main player, maybe the main piece of a team. But Fred VanVleet right now, like I said, quite frankly, the most exciting player in free agency last year in Toronto, 17-6, is an NBA champion. We know he's a young player, obviously, plays on both sides of the basketball, has a chip on his shoulder. No one saw him being this good. So yes, VanVleet, quite honestly, in my opinion, one of the most exciting players in this year's free agency. I cannot wait to see what he does. I think Toronto will and should do whatever it takes to keep him. He's a huge part of that team, their culture. So I definitely think Toronto should make a huge effort, would do whatever they take to keep him. But, kind of depends. Does VanVleet want to stay in Toronto? Maybe, stay where he is. Is he comfortable where he is? Or does he want to go and chase a payday, and chase, a bigger role perhaps? It really depends on what VanVleet wants to do, because I know there's a market out there for Fred VanVleet. Goran Dragic is also out there in the free agent market this year, but after the plantar tear he suffered in the NBA Finals, only played in, I think, the final game of the Finals besides the first 20 minutes of Game 1. Despite that, in the postseason up until the NBA Finals, and a very impressive performance from him, got him propelled up and back into the starting lineup. Was the sixth man for a whole lot of the year. Once Kendrick Nunn, I think, either got injured or maybe perhaps had some shaky performances in the postseason, they move Goran into the starting lineup. They do great. They honestly catch fire, and they beat Milwaukee. They beat Boston. They obviously beat Indiana easily. So that was a huge factor in Miami's success, was definitely coming from Goran Dragic. However, like I said, after the injury in the NBA Finals, not quite sure how many teams will want to take a risk on him coming back. We know he didn't look great in that Game 6. We know he just obviously suffered the injury, but will he come back? Obviously, people are hoping he comes back 100%. Not too severe of an injury, people are hoping, as of right now, but I am guessing as of now Miami will sign him because of what he did this past year. Miami is going to sign him to a short-term, maybe 1 or 2 year deal. When he gets healthy, they'll test him out again. But yeah, I think he will re-sign with Miami, rehab, get healthy again. Maybe by the end of the season or midway of the season, be able to help them and contribute again, help them push for another title run perhaps. But Goran, I am expecting a short-term deal for him in Miami, and then prepare yourselves, guys. I'm going to list a very long list of players. Okay, a very long list of players, but all of these guys are available in this year's free agency, and I think all of them could be potentially could fill very big roles on competing and contending teams in the coming years. So prepare yourselves. A lot of names about to be thrown at you, okay? Rajon Rondo, Jeremy Grant, Joe Harris, KCP, Paul Millsap, Tristan Thompson, Derek Favors, Marcus Morris, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, Dwight Howard, Jay Crowder. All of those players are available. I'll go through one more time. Rondo, Jeremy Grant, Joe Harris, KCP, Paul Millsap, Tristan Thompson, Derek Favors, Marcus Morris, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, Dwight Howard, and Jay Crowder. There are more players I could put on that list, but man, they are all available. And like I said, that's a lot of very good role players potentially for championship contending teams. The Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Bucks, Miami, maybe Boston, Denver perhaps, the Rockets. Expect those guys on maybe some of these teams. These are some of the contending teams, and all of those players definitely capable of filling roles on these teams, contributing on these teams. So again, Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, Bucks, Miami, maybe Denver, maybe Houston, maybe Boston. No matter who, those teams that are competing, expect those names to be interviewed by these teams. Rightfully so. Those guys can all play a big role. There's also players out there available like DeMarcus Cousins, Carmelo Anthony, Isaiah Thomas, Hassan Whiteside. All of those players could make a big difference on whatever teams they sign. Again, not a whole lot of superstars in this year's free agency, but man, it is loaded with players who can contribute on contending teams. We will continue to look at this year's free agency. Again, there are more players I didn't discuss today, but man, those are a whole lot of players. This year's free agency is looking deep. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to discuss this year's NBA draft. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Like I said before the break, let's go ahead and take a look at this year's NBA draft. I just got done taking a look at this year's NBA free agency, which we don't quite know when it is going to take place. But unlike free agency, we actually know when the NBA draft is going to take place, and that will be on November 18th. So November 18th, mark your calendars. That is when the NBA draft is set to take place. It will be the first virtual draft in NBA history, following somewhat in the NFL's footsteps, if you will. Their virtual draft, I think, was a huge success. Went very well. I watched it myself. Usually not a huge fan of the NFL draft. Watching it for a long period of time. I mean, it can get kind of old and repetitive, a little boring at times. However, I found myself completely intrigued into the virtual NBA or NFL draft. They did a great job. I think the NBA will follow in their footsteps, doing a very good, if not an even better job with their virtual draft. And similar, I know it's unlike this year's free agency because we know when it will be, but it's similar to this year's free agency because there doesn't appear to be a number one overall, superstar, a number one overall pick that's easy to make. So it's somewhat similar to free agency in that way. There isn't a number one overall pick, an easy superstar pick in this year's overall draft, similar to free agency, obviously. But I still think we still may get, some quality players in this year's draft. But since there isn't an easy number one pick, stories are coming out saying Minnesota, teams like Minnesota, I should say. Minnesota, though, still does not know what they're going to do. They still don't have a clear choice for that number one pick. They're still weighing all of their options 1 month away from the draft. We know the lottery's in place, the players are all in place. With the number, again, with there not being an easy number one overall pick, it makes sense kind of for Minnesota not to have a clear, choice for that number one pick. This is Minnesota's actually third time. This is Minnesota's third time having the number one overall pick in recent years. Karl Anthony Towns, a number one overall pick. Andrew Wiggins was a number one overall pick. And obviously now they have a number one overall pick. Let me know if I'm forgetting any. That's 3 in recent years since Karl Anthony Towns has been in the league. So no more than 4 or 5 years they have had 3 number one overall picks. And with most mock drafts, don't let me forget, I will do my own mock draft when we get closer to the NBA draft. But I want to discuss what I've been seeing in a whole lot of mock drafts so far. I took a look at a few of them, and overall they were pretty similar for the most part. Some people, had LaMelo Ball going number 1, which is kind of weird to me, to Minnesota, because they already have a point guard. They just traded for a point guard. So some were kind of outlandish, far-fetched, didn't quite make a whole lot of sense for the game plan and for the teams and for the players. But for the ones I looked at, and then the ones that I liked, for the most part, they had Anthony Edwards, the guard from Georgia, going number 1 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are needing a versatile guard, a two-way guard, go and get his own shot, maybe try to lead an offense a little bit, move the ball, go get his own shot at times, and who can as well switch and play defensively, play versatily defensively. So they're looking for a guy like that. I think Edwards is potentially their guy, has defensive potential. We know what he can do on the offensive side, of a pretty good offensive player, a very good offensive player. I don't love his shooting percentages, though, from his college career. So I don't love what I've seen from him shooting the ball necessarily. But it's no doubt he can score the ball, and he has defensive potential. So I think overall it's pretty easy to say that Anthony Edwards should be going number 1 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I've also been hearing either James Wiseman going to Golden State at number 2, or Golden State's going to flip that pick, trade the number 2 overall pick for maybe an all-star player, a veteran player. Who knows? Maybe they move down in the draft. Who knows what they're going to do? But, the two biggest options are obviously for Golden State. You draft a center because you need a guy to combat an Anthony Davis, maybe a Giannis Antetokounmpo. So you draft a center like James Wiseman, who is looking like the best center in the draft, quite possibly, or you trade it for an already established player, which you guys know what I think on that matter. Last week's episode, or earlier this week's episode, I talked about what Golden State should do. If you missed that, go check it out. It was Monday's episode. But I think they should flip the pick, try to get an established player, help them win now. But people have either had them getting Wiseman or trading the pick. I predict a trade on draft night. And then I love this move for Charlotte. I love the move for Charlotte. If LaMelo Ball is still available at number 3, I love the move for them to go ahead and snatch him up at number 3. He is easily the biggest name in this draft available, so he needs to be a Hornet if he is still available. Charlotte has not been relevant in years, losing their guy in Kemba Walker, their franchise point guard in Kemba Walker last year to the Celtics. Again, they haven't been relevant in who knows how long. The only time they are relevant is when they're playing a team like the Cavs or the Heat in the postseason, only to get swept. So again, a team that has not been relevant, if they draft a guy like LaMelo Ball, that will help them get them into relevancy. So help put butts in seats, help sell some Hornets jerseys, which aren't right now really selling for the most part, I can guarantee. So LaMelo Ball at number 3. Michael Jordan, don't mess it up. Snatch LaMelo Ball up at number 3. If you are Charlotte, it definitely makes sense. Perhaps we'll see someone move up and take him at number 1, number 2. Maybe New York. We'll see. I'm not quite sure what they have, as far as asset wise. As far as the number 4 pick goes, for Chicago, they could go with Denny Advija, Killian Hayes. However, I think Obi Toppin is the more reliable choice for Chicago at number 4, a 6'9", guard, a 6'9" forward. Definitely can play on both sides of the floor seemingly. So I think Chicago takes Obi Toppin with number 4, but ultimately they get their choice of Killian Hayes, Denny, Obi Toppin. Really depends on what Chicago's looking at. And then Cleveland also choosing from whoever is left. They'll have Isaac Okoro, I think, from Auburn. I'm not quite sure how you say his name. Also another Okengwa from USC. I'm butchering these names. Tyler Halliburton from Iowa State, all those guys will probably still be available at the number 5 picks. We'll see who Cleveland decides to go with at number 5, who will still be available. We'll see if any players drop down to number 5. Either way, we're about a month away. We'll see what happens. Even though there's not a clear number 1 overall pick, I still have faith in this year's NBA draft, the prospects in the draft, to produce and become some pretty quality NBA players. I'm going to take my final break of the episode today of the podcast. When I come back, talk about Damian Lillard, his comments on what attributes he would take from any NBA player in NBA history. That is coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Like I said before the break, my final break of the show. This is my final segment of the show right here. I want to go ahead and break down what Damian Lillard said on social media here recently. Lillard was asked on Twitter by a fan, hey, out of anybody in NBA history, what attributes he would take, again, from any player in NBA history. His answer equated to, quite frankly, a legendary player. Perhaps easily this player would be the best player of all time. The player Lillard described, the attributes that Lillard would want. And Lillard answered the fan. Lillard answered the fan by saying he would want Michael Jordan's athleticism, LeBron James's durability, Kevin Durant's size and skill set. Okay, so MJ's athleticism, LeBron's durability, Durant's size and skill set. So basically, what Damian is wanting, the kind of player Damian is building here, is wanting himself to be, basically, is a player who jumps and moves like Michael Jordan. Okay, so who jumps and moves like Michael Jordan, who shoots the 3-ball, the mid-range, and the close range, and who is 7 feet tall, and then got a guy who never misses a game. So in recap, he wants a guy who never misses a game, who's 7 feet tall, and can shoot from all levels of the court, all 3 levels, a 3-way scorer, and then he can jump and move like Michael Jordan. Jump, dunk over buddy, dribble past anybody. So basically, those 99 overall players you used to make in 2K when you guys were little kids and stuff, and you make your own player, right, and make him a 99 overall. I know you guys did it. I used to do it as well. But basically, yeah, this is that player that you used to build in 2K when you were a little kid. Again, a guy who moves like Michael Jordan, and LeBron's durability and Durant's size and skill set. Yeah, that's basically the best player that would ever touch a basketball court, a 7-footer who can shoot like that, move like that, who never gets hurt, ultimately, knocking on wood, right? But so yes, ultimately a great answer from Dame. You can't hope for too much more, for a star like that. He didn't implement any of his own tricks in there, which is kind of humbling, right? He didn't say, oh, my this with this. No, he said all other players for the most part. So humbling for a little bit, not so much of a cocky player right there for Dame. We know he has confidence, but maybe not too cocky there, right? I like what I see from Dame, definitely. But I would definitely make some changes of my own to those attributes, to those skill sets. Again, I definitely like Dames, but instead of durability for LeBron James, I prefer to use the term consistent or consistency from LeBron James. Okay, I know he's been durable and he doesn't necessarily get hurt, but durability is really just injury prone. Like, you're not injury prone, I'm sorry. You're not getting hurt, not getting injured, you're durable. But if, consistency means you're remaining at the level you're at for a long period of time, you're consistent. And I think he's both. He's been very durable in his career, but he's also been very, very consistent with his level of play. So instead of durability for LeBron, I prefer to use the term consistent or consistency for LeBron James. He is definitely both, like I said. And as far as who what I would want, the attributes I would want all time, I know Damian Lillard did it. No one asked me what I think, but I want to tell you anyway, okay? I want to tell you guys mine. So I would want Michael Jordan's mid-range game and his killer mentality, okay? No matter who or what is in his way, no matter how many people, not always are guarding him necessarily, but no matter what, he was going to make the right play. More than likely, that was him taking the last shot and making the last shot. So I want his killer mentality, Michael Jordan's killer mentality, as well as his mid-range game. One of the best, if not the best, mid-range scorer of all time, backing people down, falling away, simply rising up over players. So his mid-range game, killer mentality from Jordan. I want LeBron James. I want his athleticism. So I want LeBron's athleticism and his consistency in his basketball IQ. A lot of things I want from LeBron. They didn't just say one or two things, though. They didn't put a limit on it, so I can pick as many things as I want, okay? So I want Jordan's mid-range game, killer mentality, LeBron's athleticism, consistency, and basketball IQ. And then the final, piece of the puzzle, the final attribute I would want would be Steph Curry's three-point shooting. So that is my ideal player. I think a little bit of everything for you. Again, Jordan's mid-range, killer mentality, LeBron's athleticism, consistency, IQ, Steph's three-point shooting. That is my ideal player, my ideal attributes, a little bit, if not a lot of everything, a little bit from all eras, if you will. If a team tries to take away the three-pointer, you go inside, you drive to the basket, or you fall away and take a mid-range jump shot, or rise up over a guy and take the mid-range jump shot. Or if they're packing the paint, making you shoot the ball, you simply rise up for the three-point shot, the mid-range shot, whatever it is, and knock down the outside jumper. And then with LeBron's IQ, if everything is going wrong for you offensively, defensively, at least you can get the ball going to the right players, making the right making the right play overall with that LeBron James's IQ. So all things taken into consideration, no offense to Damian Lillard or anything. Okay, no offense to the player he picked or the player he built. I'm going with my guy, though. Okay, Dames is okay. I'm riding with my player, however, a guy who can shoot like Steph, drive, and has the IQ of LeBron James, who has the mid-range game and killer mindset of LeBron James. I'm taking that guy over Dames or any other player perhaps you can give to me. Maybe you can say a dominant guy like Shaq with the three-point shooting, with dribbling like Kyrie, or there are other combinations, but for the most part, I like what I said. Dames is okay. I'm riding with my player. However, that's going to be it for the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you all for your continued support with the NBA season, coming to a close. I look forward to looking into next season with you all. Again, this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Go check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Go leave us a comment or review on whatever platform you are listening on. But for right now, okay, I'm going to go do more research on this year's free agency, the draft, and everything leading into next year's January. We don't have an official start date yet for the NBA season. We know January. Again, we don't. I know, like I said, we don't have an official start date for the NBA free agency. We don't know start date for free agency. I'll keep you guys posted as I get the news. But like I've been saying, thank you for the continued support. I'll see you guys on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.